beautiful score and the song you just heard, Nitin Sawhney. Mowgli himself is here, you guys, Rohan Chand. And he's blue, and he also directed this. Andy Serkis is here. Thank you guys all so much for seeing me and talking to me tonight.
Thank you.
So Andy, clearly you know a thing or two about performance capture. You've done it a time or two. But how did you know you had an entire film in you composed of performance capture?
Well, you know, the thing is, it was really the only way to do it because we wanted to have very close relationships between the animals and Mowgli, and this technology, as you know, as has been discussed over the last 2 decades, basically, is this incredible tool, this 21st century tool for actors to totally embody other, to become something else, regardless. It's the most egalitarian actors tool of the 21st century. You can, regardless of the color of your skin, the height you are, the size you are, you can become anything, you can play any character. And I think the reason that we were able to attract such an incredible cast was because, you know, they wanted to challenge themselves in some way. They wanted to, apart from the fact it was a great script and they really wanted to join the journey to tell the story, I think a lot of them wanted to challenge themselves to not just see another version of themselves on screen, but to really go there and to find a character and to be able to embody that physically and emotionally and to become something else, to become other.
But most of them had not done this before. Benedict Cumberbatch is, of course, Smaug, but most of them, despite being incredibly acclaimed and experienced, have not done this.
No, and I think when we all sat around the table, you know, for the first read-through, everybody said, okay, so what's the secret? What is the secret with performance capture? And I said, the secret is there is no secret. I mean, it really, I think there's a lot of misunderstanding about the technology. Really, it's just another bunch of cameras that are capturing your performance. It's instead of the film camera, or the digital cameras now that we use, you know, it's cameras in 360 degrees and a facial camera that captures your expressions. But in the process of acting is all about embodying character and making decisions about character and owning that and authoring the role. And that's what we do, whether you're playing a live action role, whether you're on stage, whether you're using performance capture. There is no mystery. You are playing a character. It just happens to be a bear or not even just actually that's wrong. It's not just I'm playing a bear or I'm playing a panther or I'm playing a tiger. It's who is Shere Khan? What is he made up of? What composes him? What's his psychological state? Why is he angry? Why is he impotent? Why is it, you ask the same questions whatever role you're playing. So I can't state enough that yes, you need to do some sort of research into the animal. Of course, you do a lot of research about behavior and so on, but ultimately it comes down to character and owning the character, and that's what we do as actors.
This was a bit of a hybrid, though, from a lot of performance capture that you have done throughout your career, correct? Like, Christian Bale's not down on all fours.
He was, actually.
Was he? Okay. I thought he was doing like mostly facial performance capture.
It is a hybrid. I mean, to be fair, it is slightly different to the way that we approached Apes, because that was one-to-one performance capture with all of the physicality. But with all the best will in the world, you cannot run as fast as a panther, or you cannot run as fast as a wolf. So there was a handover to animation. But when we, you look at the cast, people approach the physicality in different ways. So, for instance, Peter Mullen, who plays Akela, the Wolfpack leader, hardly moved a muscle. He wanted to play him in a very stoic, sitting on top of Council Rock. He hardly moved, and it was all in his eyes and all in his face. And that was his approach to the performance. Whereas you've got Benedict, who's playing Khan, and he was using crutches, using one crutch because the other one was his dodgy paw, and it was, people use people found different ways of finding physicality for their role. Tom Hollander playing Tabaki was like a manic whirling dervish going around spinning around. And those cues became, those physical cues were what the animators then picked up on. So it's not, it doesn't just stop at the facial capture. You don't just sort of like act with your face. It's your body is, if you look at the reference footage of all of these performances, you can see how the animators then grafted them into the quadruped nature of the way that the animals move.
Yeah, you can really see it in the eyes, and Christian Bale, you can really feel his performance behind it. So Rohan, what's it like for you in the middle of all this? Because it's a big soundstage sometimes, it's a green screen sometimes. You're telling me a story before we came out here about a grape and a potato chip, and how that was the fly that was grasped. So what was it like for you to be in the midst of all this?
Well, I mean, it was obviously really great to be able to work with like Christian and Kate and Benedict and Andy especially. It was really great to be able to learn from them and really see how they're the best in the business, really. And I mean, obviously, like working with them, it was really great because Christian really embodied the panther, and Kate really embodied Ka the snake. But yeah, I mean, you really don't get that same feedback. With performance capture, you get so much more feedback than if you would have worked with animation. So I think it's really great, especially from the audience perspective as well, to be able to see, as you said, Christian's face through Bagheera and Kate's face through Ka. Whereas with animation, obviously, they're mostly just lending their voice.
You were 14.
Yes.
But you were 11 when you began this process?
Yeah, I got involved in this back in 2014 when I was 10 actually, and I started principal photography, actually shooting my stuff when I was 11 years old.
This has to have been the hardest thing you've ever done in your life, I'm guessing.
Well, I mean, it was pretty challenging, especially like being a 10-year-old and 11-year-old, and due to the nature of the storyline, actually, I decided to play Mowgli as more of a 14 or 15-year-old, closer to the third act. So being an 11-year-old and trying to play a 14-year-old is pretty challenging. I mean, you really don't have those same experiences to draw on as a 14-year-old playing a 14-year-old. So, yeah.
Where did you find him then? How did you come to understand him?
Yeah, so I think Andy actually really helped me with that process because, I mean, obviously I really had to just get into the headspace of Mowgli and just go through what he's going through, think what he's thinking. Really just question the same things that he's questioning. And I think Andy did a really good job of guiding me through that and pushing me to get to Mowgli.
Now, this is a really different kind of Jungle Book tale than we have seen previously. Why tell this story this way? What were you hoping to show folks that they hadn't seen before?
Most people come to Jungle Book through the 1967 animation. A lot of people aren't even aware that there's a book. They think it starts and ends with the bare necessities and King Louie. And much as though I grew up and loved those that film, of course we're all intoxicated by that film. There is the slightly darker source material that we wanted to get in contact with, and also to tell a tale. I think a lot of adaptations of the Jungle Book almost forget Mowgli. They actually concentrate on celebrating the antics of the animals and the star turns by the actors who play the animals, and in a way Mowgli is almost left out of the equation. And this was always going to be a darker retelling, but more importantly than that, an emotional version of a child that is going through an extraordinary change. Caught between two worlds and feeling like an outsider, and that was what appealed to me about the book, and what appealed to me about the way that we wanted to do it was to really question and get inside the notion of being other, of being an outsider, and not being able to exist within the world of animals where there are rules and customs and laws, and just not feeling quite that, or being able to assimilate into the world of man and absolutely not being able to fit into those customs, rules and laws. And that in some way it also reflects Rudyard Kipling's experience of growing up. I mean, his first language was Hindi. He was brought up in India. And then at a quite young age, he was sent to live in Britain and had a very brutalised upbringing in a boarding house, and terribly missed his childhood home. And so that was kind of what was informing this sense of displacement, of yearning to belong, this sense of trying to work out your moral compass, trying to see how you fit into society, and I think it is a book of its time, but it also feels incredibly relevant to now. I think we live in times where we are struggling to, where we do feel alienated, where we don't know how we fit in. There are millions of people around the world who are displaced. There are people who don't know how to, what is home, what is their centre. Why is it that people are feeling like they're on the edge of the centre of someone else's centre, basically?
I know you began working on this several years ago, but yes, it does feel so relevant. It certainly can be interpreted in a lot of ways that do resonate today, certainly. You're directing and you're also acting. How are you juggling both of those jobs at the same time?
Well, I think I didn't intend to play Baloo, actually. When we started casting this, we were looking for other actors to play Baloo, and then we cast every single role and just kind of come away thinking, well, we've got an amazing cast, except we were wondering about Baloo. And then it sort of, everyone sort of turned around in the rooms and Andy, it seems a bit crazy that you're not in it. And I thought, well, no, I'm going to have my hands full here because it's a big project. But in actual fact, I think if I am going to approach this, then I want to again go back to the book and look at a character which is often played as a sort of comic buffoon, as a sort of slightly happy hippie, singer of great songs. But actually, I thought his function as a character, as a teacher, is much more about enabling Mowgli and the wolf cubs to survive. That is his job, and I was really inspired by Rudyard Kipling's stories of the working class soldiers that he wrote about, and the colonial soldiers, and the fact that, so really I kind of based him on in a more military way, and wanted him to be, he was called Iron Paws, and because he really did give them a clout, give them a good old hit, if they didn't do what they were told. And he's much stricter in the book, and it's about enabling them to survive and hiding the affection and not showing it so much. But you see it, but it's hidden beneath a sort of full metal jacket, drill sergeant and sort of exterior.
So I'm trying to picture it. Are you in the full performance capture gear and you're directing your fellow actors?
For some of it, yeah, absolutely, yeah. You kind of lose a little bit of authority.
Stuck on your head.
Yeah.
So you know what you're doing in that regard. What did you tell your actors to get those performances out of them?
Well, with a cast like that, they are all very capable they're all self-reliant, brilliant, inventors of character and highly skilled, some more physically than others, as we were discussing. But it really is, look, when you do approach a character like that, if you imagine you draw a Venn diagram around, the character is out here, and then your own personal life experience and who you are is kind of around here, and that crossover point is a sort of a shifting centre that you have to kind of go out to reach. I mean, some people wanted to bring the character closer to themselves, like Peter Mullen playing Aquila, again, very still, very, he has this incredible quality. But I suppose what I'm saying is every single actor has their different approach. And my job was to allow them to feel comfortable enough to get into the character in whichever way that they needed to do that. So there wasn't a lot of tutoring because they were doing what they're good at doing, which is becoming a character.
And how is it playing a bear versus playing Gollum versus playing Caesar versus playing whatever Snoke is? What is Snoke? Is Snoke a person? Is he human?
He is, yeah, of sorts. Look, Yes, so there's a certain amount of study looking at how a bear moves, but it was more about the character. Because these animals are really extensions of human beings. They're not, for instance, they're very different to the way we approach language in the apes movies, where it's a proto-language. The apes are learning to speak. There's a sort of logic to them, making gorilla sounds or chimpanzee sounds which morph into sort of proto-language, etc. This is totally different. These are fully, they're human beings who happen to be animals. They represent human characteristics. So that really affected the design of all of the creatures. Sorry, I'm slightly going off topic, but it's quite interesting because what we did with this in the early phases of working with the visual effects team and the actors was we would go, okay, to license these animals to really, because one thing I really can't bear is like a photorealistic animal and then a voice that doesn't feel like it's coming out of the voice box of a real tiger or they've got to look, and we've got to design them so that we make you feel like you're looking at something that's physically real and a real being. But in order to really take that to take the leap of faith that they're talking, you have to design them in a particular way. So, for instance, we would start with, my face over here, and then Baloo, then a bear rather over here, and then what we do is like morph images of my face that are getting closer and closer and closer to a bear, and then you look along this timeline, and then you find a sweet spot where you actually see the facial expressions of the actor and the fate and the physiognomy of the creature, and they cross over, and you go, that's the design. That's right there, and that we did with every single actor, and that I think is allows them a real emotional expression, the real connection to the other actors, and you can really read what's going on, and this film has a lot of close-ups of the animals, unlike many other adaptations, which is more about vista and wide shots. We go right into the eyes of most of the animals a lot of the time.
And Nitin, so you've worked with Andy also on Breathe.
That's right.
So what is your collaborative process like together?
Well, it's great actually. We kind of discussed. We discussed it quite a lot of time. We spent a lot of time kind of going through the characters right from the very beginning, and I think the first thing I did was I got a kind of overture, got a theme for Mowgli, and the way I did that was by watching lots of different scenes of Mowgli, of Rohan performing in different kind of emotional contexts. So it was about trying to find something that could be adapted to each of the different aspects of his journey. But also we talked about the law of the jungle and this idea of using even throat singing at one point, and even there's a particular instrument which is a bit like an Indian classical sarangi, which is called a swaleen, which also encapsulated car. So we wanted to keep the authenticity of the Indian classical influences and blend them with the orchestral feeling as well, and so it retained that epic quality that people are more familiar with big films like this, but also to give it that feeling of something that really felt quite authentic, and to the point that I actually went over to South Africa and spent time over there with Andy when he was filming some of it, and it was great to be invited to do that. So, for example, for the holy scene, which you were at as well, it was great, and I'm actually in the film as well. I'm this old Sikh guy at the fire scene. I've just got a brief moment. You'll hear a fantastic orchestral swell over that moment.
Nobody talked to Nitin because they didn't recognise him, so he was suddenly persona non grata, and it's just like, oh well, who is that?
Cool.
And you are of Indian descent.
Yes.
So why was it important to you to be a part of this story?
It's fascinating because with this, it's really a story of Mowgli caught between two worlds, the worlds of animals and of men. But for me, it was interesting growing up as a British Asian, where I quite often felt when I went to school. I won't go into the politics of it, but I went to a school where there was quite a lot of racism where I grew up, and so it was quite interesting because I found myself between two worlds quite often, and I really identified with Mowgli in that respect. So it kind of felt like something I could really empathise with and find my own way into. So, yeah.
And Rohan, this is a very physical role for you. How did you train for this? You're running a lot.
Yeah, so I mean, obviously, running on all fours isn't really natural to do, but I mean, yeah, I did some research on YouTube. Also camped out with wolves in upstate New York in order to really kind of see how they move and incorporate that into Mowgli. And I also put a lot of like physical training into this. Like I did push-ups, pull-ups, stuff like that. I practiced running on all fours as well at like 6 a.m. in the morning. But yeah, I did a lot of agility training on top of that. You know. Yeah,
I want to hear about the camping. You camped with wolves. What was that like?
Yeah, so I mean, it's really interesting because these wolves haven't really been interfered with almost by humans. Humans haven't really touched upon them as much as obviously in a zoo or something like that. But yeah, I mean, it was really great to be able to see how they interact with each other and how, you know, the interaction between the alpha and the omega, and you know, just really to incorporate that into Mowgli, I think was really important as well.
So coming out of this experience, was it kind of unusual or strange to get back to the normal outside world again after being so deeply immersed in it as Mowgli?
Well, I mean, I guess I kind of slipped back into being a normal 14-year-old boy, I guess, or well, I guess 12 or 13 or 11 at the time. But I mean, yeah, Mowgli and I are very different people, you know. I mean, quite frankly, we should be.
Clothing on, yes.
For starters, quite frankly, we should be. But I mean, yeah, just I always try to find like a common thread in a character, or I try to incorporate something from each character and kind of incorporate that into my own life. And with Mowgli, I really think it was his perseverance, because obviously he gets so many obstacles thrown at him over and over and over again, and he just finds a way to push through that. And I think that's really important, especially in my life with school and sports, everything.
How do you juggle it all? The work and the acting and the school?
Yeah, so I mean, actually, I always have a studio teacher on set to communicate with my teachers back home, and you know, education has been very stressful for me from a young age, but
You told me earlier you've seen it like 3 times now. So what do you see differently each time you see it?
Yeah, so I think it's really great from an audience perspective. I mean, just to be able to see like Christian's face through Bagheera is just amazing. And as Andy said, Kipling really wrote these characters, these animals, with human emotions and human characteristics in mind. So I think that like performance capture is perfect for that, because you can really see Christian's human emotions through Bagheera. And it's also a very Mowgli-centric story, and this is how Mowgli sees the animals, and for the audience to get a look at that throughout the whole movie is, I think, really great.
And what do you hope folks get out of this experience?
Oh wow! I mean, there's so many layers to this film, and you know, I think that, as I was saying, you know, that whole sense of looking at the perseverance and the resilience of somebody who comes through feeling torn between two worlds, and who actually manages to transcend both worlds and become something greater than both in a lot of ways. I think there's a real lesson to be learned from that, without getting too political again. But I think it's a very inspiring story, the way it's told here, and I think it's also it has a visceral power to it that I don't think we've seen in the telling of this before, and that's what I really enjoy. And I think you come away with hopefully feeling uplifted by the whole story.
Let's take questions. Right here.
So, it was a great film. Performances were great. I have 2 quick ones. Your son's character, I don't know if he's here, but really captured my heart. Like, I wanted to cry for it. So what was it like directing your son, but also the toddler that plays Mowgli is like, how did you get, what was he staring at to get that intense?
The question is, if I may, directing your son. Thank you for asking that. I meant to ask that and totally spaced it. Good job. Directing your son, how was that? And then the infant, the toddler, like looks so serious. How did you get that look on the toddler's face?
So Louis, who plays Boot, he at home there's a studio that we have called the Imaginarium, which is our performance capture studio. And before I even came on board with to direct Mowgli, or Jungle Book as it was then, we had been working on George Orwell's Animal Farm, and we'd been doing some testing, and we needed someone to play a young piglet. And so I brought in Louis, who's an actor. You know, he'd acted in other things. He started to play this Piglet character, and it was kind of really sweet, and it again kind of had an innocence to him. And then when we started working on the film, and I read this part, and I just thought, gosh, you know, I think he could really do this. And so we talked. You know, I talked at great length about this character, how important it was that Mowgli had some kind of soulmate, or that in fact Boot had a soulmate, someone he really looked up to, someone that he trusted with his life, and that in a way that he wasn't a victim. He never saw himself as a victim. He actually was really happy with who he is, despite the fact that he's the runt of the litter and everybody else despises him. He sort of has this outward kind of sunny disposition and kind of almost. He sort of protects himself somehow. So we discussed that a lot, and he got into it, and they just formed, you know, Rohan and Louis formed this great relationship on set, and it really worked well. And it's you know, and as a result, I think that the work that they both did really made that relationship quite special. Then I had to put my own son's head on a stick, which wasn't very easy, but you know, got to do it. That's the movie. And then the other directing the baby, who is utterly brilliant. At the beginning of the movie, what you're seeing is about 6. Or, you know, about 30 seconds out of about 22 hours of shooting. Or twins. And of course, you know, shooting babies is notoriously difficult. But to get him to do what he had to do was very, very difficult. The scenes where he's staring up at Aquila, and Aquila is breathing down at him, and there's a beautiful moment of connection, is that child looking up at Peppa Pig on an iPhone. Sorry to destroy the needs must in the world. And it did.
Over here on the left, please.
Beautiful film. I have a question. This is, I thought, a Disney franchise. How did Warner Brothers and Netflix take over ownership of the story? And did you find it a monumental task touching a classic film?
No, I mean, it's interesting. So the question is it, you know, people thought it was a Disney franchise, and of course it's not a Disney franchise. It's a public domain book that was written in 1895. So Disney got hold of that book. They do not own the franchise of the Jungle Books. That is a perception that a lot of people have, and that somehow Warner's were doing something, you know, like behind Disney's back. And that's just not the case. It's a public domain book. And when we did start making this movie, there was no Disney version that was up and coming, and it was commissioned. The script was commissioned, and we thought, wow, there hasn't been a version of Jungle Book in a long time. Suddenly, we found ourselves in a race.
Who else? Right here, please.
Hi, very honored to meet you. Everyone did a great job. From a story standpoint, what made you decide not to include King Louis into the film?
Again, King Louis. So the question is, why did we not include King Louis? King Louis is a Disney invention, a complete Disney invention. So he doesn't exist in the actual Jungle Book. So that was again something that people have said. Well, where's the big ape? You know, where's the I want to be like you guy. And the fact of the matter is, he's a Disney invention that was created for Louis Prima to play actually in the 1967 animation.
You blew my mind.
In the back, gentleman in the back, yes.
Hi, great film. I've done motion capture myself, and it's very exciting. For the people that don't do motion capture, or some of the actors that you had on set at the time, was it difficult, or what was the hardest thing for them to learn about motion capture?
Well, as I say, you know, I went out of my way to explain to them there isn't really any mystery, and if you've done some, you'll know that there is no mystery. Acting is acting, whether you're wearing costume and makeup or wearing a performance capture suit and a head-mounted camera. It's about discovering character. So it's about being informed about who is Shere Khan. in our version and in the book, he should be this majestical, predator of the jungle, the top beast, but he's not, because he's lame. He was born lame, and so he can't hunt, and so he has to kill cattle to survive. And by killing cattle, he brings danger into the jungle. So with that comes an enormous amount of impotence and rage and hatred. And who's he going to point the finger at? So it's all about character, and that's, as you well know as an actor, that's what informs what you're building to psychologically, emotionally, and physically.
Right here, please.
Hi, I just wanted to ask you about the casting process for Mowgli, and how many people you looked at, and how did you come to Rohan?
Casting for Rohan. How did you find him?
Casting Mowgli. So we, I feel the most incredibly lucky person on the planet, because we fully expected to do like a 2,000 to 3,000 child search to find our Mowgli, and Rohan was in fact the third person that we came across, and amazing. Lucy Bevan, who's our casting director, who is incredible, suggested that I watch Lone Survivor, which is Mark Wahlberg's film, and which Rohan has a wonderful appearance in at the end, and I kind of thought that was an extraordinary performance, and I could see real potential there. And then we met over. You rehearsed some scenes, and you did some scenes, and then we met over Skype. Rohan was in New York, I was in London, and I just knew from the moment that we started working together that he was it. I mean, it was a big gamble, because it's like, who are the other 1,900 people that you could possibly see? There's got to be a great one in there somewhere. But I just absolutely knew that Rohan had the capability, that he had this incredible wisdom about the character. He knew the world. He read Rudyard Kipling as a child. He was totally he owned that character, and physically, seeing him, it was just like, it was as if Rudyard Kipling had described it for Rohan to play.
You did an amazing job.
Right here, please.
He did.
Yes, you.
So there's two themes, I think one of which is otherness, which you've already talked about, but also it's like the theme of balance, right? Balance between the two worlds, balance on an environmental level, and it seems, given some of the reports that have come out recently, all of it, the timing is sort of brilliantly beautiful, and I'm sort of curious how much you were aware of those themes as you were doing it, and sort of the consciousness of bringing that forth now, and that process.
One of the things that was very important to me when we were working on this was to culturally specifically set it back in India, because not many productions, I don't think, even go there. I mean, much as though I do love the Jon Favreau version, it looks like the Serengeti of Africa, and this is an Indian story with set in an Indian culture, and it was based on it was written at a time when Britain was the British Empire was at its height, and it colonized India. So I feel like you can't make a film about a Jungle Book film without addressing those themes in 2018. It's whitewashing if you do. You really have to understand the time at that time the book was written, and what the British Empire was doing. So we wanted to somehow, without being overtly political, but through the allegory and through the metaphor of these characters, somehow introduce the notion of colonialization and man encroaching into the jungle and destroying another world for his betterment. And so the one thing that we did was we changed the hunter, who in the book is an Indian hunter, to a colonial white hunter, who is and there were many who went around going from village to village as tiger killers and collectors of trophies. At that time, and so the balance of man and the encroachment into the jungle was hugely important to the themes of the piece, and we really, as I say, without being overtly political, but we wanted to underpin it with this this ecosystem that is changing, that man, yes, the Indian villagers were encroaching into the jungle, but the sort of on top of that, you had this other threat that was coming in, which is colonialization.
Let's do one more, please. Yes, right here. Yes, behind the question we just asked. Yes, the gentleman right here.
Two things really. The movie was so immersive and just totally stunning visually, but the emotion of the animal actors, of how you got that emotion out of them, was just incredible. The question I wanted to ask was also, how did you guys do the pacing of the movie? Because it managed to be both fast feeling and slow and gentle at the same time, and I really was drawn in by that. So those two things. There was so much humanity in the animals, I want to say, more so than the human actors. The animals just show so much humanity.
Well, that is the beauty of using that technology, of using, allowing actors to fully embody, creatures or beings, because you do see that the soul of the actor coming through, and particularly, I mean, I do think that Christian's performance is absolutely extraordinary in this, and the relationship that he has with Mowgli, with Rohan, and just watching them work together on set and just seeing that really play out was really beautiful to observe. And the cage scene, I'll never forget when we shot that cage scene between them. I mean, it was absolutely heartbreaking to watch. And if you were to look at the performance, the original performance of Christian, of his performance in that scene, just with his head-mounted camera and dots on, and cut with Rohan's, which is what we did, because we cut the scenes, just with the raw actors' performances before we went anywhere near putting the animation on top of that. You're just drawn into it. You totally buy the relationship. So that was kind of the way it worked with all of the animals, really. And then the other thing is the pacing of it. We were very, and this goes back to the way that Nitin and I, when we first started talking about the music in a way, we wanted to create a sense of jungle time, like having moments of real silence in there and just hearing jungle sounds before. So the first part of the movie, for instance, there's no dialogue for quite some time, just to allow the audience to kind of get into a different rhythm. Just when the baby's laid down by Bagheera, and nothing is said for quite some time. It's just little chirrups and cicadas and then little baby noises and then growls and then before there any dialogue. And so we wanted to have that sense of the jungle as a kind of a living, breathing ecosystem which has its own pace. And then on top of that, you've got the imperatives of the running, for instance, or the race that the rite of passage race, which has its own is like it's an own separate act where it's something has its own pace and then it was allowing the jungle to seep back in, and it was like a pair of bellows, sort of breathing in and out. We did that with, and Nitin achieved that musically as well, which was extraordinary. So yeah, I mean that was the pace we tried to. We didn't want to have a sort of a pace where you kind of, when sometimes you go and watch a movie and you kind of settle into a pace that you get with all movies. We wanted to try and break up those rhythms so that the jungle really was allowed to breathe in there.
It's beautiful and it's thrilling. Thank you guys for coming.